This is Harold from Ask the Mower Guy, and you know what? We're going to do a walk around on this TM10. You know, a lot of times people come into our store, and before we let them take the bike, what we like to do is we like to walk around the whole bike and say, look, here's the things that are important. You know, you can buy a brand new anything, and if you don't take care of it, and if it's not prepped right, it's going to fall apart. And so we take the time every time at our shop to do a walk around and actually, you know, point out some things that can go wrong if you don't pay good attention to it. First thing that I tell everybody is make sure you put good gas into the motor. Number one reason that we ever get a return or if there's an issue is because people don't put good gas in they have water. And be sure to treat that gas with some sort of fuel stabilizer. Now, the fuel stabilizer we use the most is like a Seafoam. You can use Stable. You can do whatever you want to. We like Seafoam. We've just used it for years. But if you put that in, it helps with the alcohol not tearing up because it's sitting for a long time, the rubber and other materials inside your carburetor. Because what happens is as that alcohol that's been added to the fuel evaporates, it will gum up a brand new carburetor. Heck, we've seen it as early as 30 days, depending on the temperature and how fast the evaporation is. All those additives that you have put into your fuel nowadays is all gunked up inside your carburetor as it evaporates. It has to go somewhere. It doesn't evaporate, and that's where you get that tarry looking sort of varnish on the inside. So make sure you add some Seafoam, something to slow down that degradation. The other thing you want to look at is you want to make sure that right there on the back where your muffler is, you got a spark arrestor. Make sure that stays clean because that will cause some constriction on the flow of the muffler out. You want to make sure that you constantly are right here. You're checking and taking out that spark plug, making sure it's clean, and making sure that it's not fouled so the engine runs good. Over on the side of the motor, you've got the oil dipstick. The oil, you know, should be fairly clean. It shouldn't be black and dirty. And when you put a little bit on your finger, make sure that it's not gritty because, you know, especially when you buy a brand new unit, you know, you want to do that first oil change according to the owner's manual. But, you know, a lot of times you could do it in 10, 15 hours. And what's it going to cost you? It's going to cost you a few bucks in oil, but change that oil and change it regularly. That's one of the things that happen the most that cause these engines just to absolutely crater is people don't do two things. One, they don't clean the air filter and oil the air filter, and they don't change the oil. That allows dirt to go straight into the engine through the carburetor, and then you lose compression, the engine doesn't work, and it's the manufacturer's fault. No, the problem is it's your fault because you didn't clean the air filter and you allowed that dirt and that crap to just go straight into the engine and ruin it. Now, on the motor itself, you want to make sure, not the motor, but the rear end, you want to make sure that the tire's straight, that your chain it is tight but not over tight. You can adjust the back alignment of the back tire. When some places that we've found that are makes that fall apart sometimes, not necessarily on this one, but just in general, is through vibration, nuts and bolts will come loose. And after you've just ridden this thing for about 15 minutes, what we want you to do is we want you to go around and make sure all these are tight. If any of them are loose, you need to put a little Loctite on it, like a blue Loctite. Tighten them back down again, make sure that they're not coming loose, because eventually what will happen is this whole sprocket will come off if you don't take the time. And I'm telling you, I can tell you stories where we tell everybody about this. Every nut and bolt on this is tight when it leaves. Well, it's going to loosen up. Something on this bike will get loose. And if you take the time, 15 minutes, let's say, and you go around and you say, hey, I ran around, I touched everything. If up on the handlebars here, you've got reservoirs. There's one reservoir here. There's one reservoir there. Those reservoirs have brake fluid in it. Now, that brake fluid, you should never really have to mess with it because it's a sealed system. If that makes sense, it's sealed. And what that means is, well, it stays in there. Should you come along and your brakes aren't working and you got to get out your brake fluid and refill those, that means that you have a problem. You have a leak. And that's the question you should be asking. Where on that tube and on that master cylinder am I leaking brake fluid? So, take the time to look for it and find out where you're leaking. Right here, you've got a kid that wants to ride, but you don't want him to go a million miles an hour. What you do is you adjust that screw right there. And it's true basically on dirt bikes and ATVs. And if you see a screw right there, that is the throttle limiter. What it does is it physically stops the ability of this throttle to be ramped up any further than where that screw sits. Further that screw's in, the slower this bike is going to go. The further that screw is out, the faster this bike is going to go. As time goes on, you're going to find right here that your cable is going to stretch a little bit just from use. Well, as it stretches, you can adjust right here. You can adjust the length of the cable in relation to the sheave here, and you get a little more reaction. Won't have as much delay because you've tightened up the cable on the inside of the machine. Now, on the inside, when you zoom in here like this, on the side of that carburetor right there, that is where you can make adjustments. On both sides of these carburetors, you're going to find a series of screws, and you're going to find different parts and pieces that make this possible to work on these machines. So let me show you what we got here. Right here, when you're looking at this, right there in the back, do you see that black spot? That is a little rubber seal. If you pop that rubber seal off, you can adjust the throttle, and what I'm saying by the throttle, the RPMs, the minimum RPM and maximum RPM that this is going to idle at. It's the idle adjustment screw is right there. And then right there on the side, that is your choke. And of course, you've got your air filter right there on the side. We live in New Mexico. Everything gets dusty. It's kind of crazy. But you want to make sure these air filters, then you'll have a little bit of dust. Isn't going to hurt anything. But if you put a little oil on these air filters, what will happen is all the dirt will stick right there to that air filter, and then you can take it off and you can go into your sink and you can just wash it out. And that makes it keeps it clean, and you're able to use that filter over and over and over and over again. Hey, one of the things that you can do, and they don't come this way from the factory, well, what you can do is you can put slime, yes, you can put slime in the tires. If you put a little slime in the tires, when the kids are out, and like where we live, we have mesquite. Mesquite is a thorny bush, and it's not native to here, but it's here. And when you're out riding, those thorns will sometimes, and they're big thorns, these are like large needles, will penetrate right through the tire and right through the tube. And it's air loss by 1,000 pricks. And if you got a little bit of slime in there, as the air escapes, it pushes that slime through the tube, and then what will happen is it'll clog the holes, and you'll get your tubes to last a lot longer. It doesn't really matter where you live. There's things that are going to poke holes in it. Big holes, yeah, you're not going to be able to clog them very easily. But if you've got lots of little natural holes in, like little pin pricks and things like that, a lot of times slime will help. You don't want to over slime it, because if you put too much in there, you throw the whole wheel out of balance. But on a dirt bike, unless you're going to high speeds, and especially on the smaller bikes like this, they're not going to get going fast enough that you're really going to notice. So these are some of the things we wanted to show you. You've got right there the on-off switch. You want to make sure that you keep the handlebars tight by keeping that area right there snug. Your tree bolt is tight. You make sure right here that your child wears this, because if they fall off and this pops off, it will kill the engine. I mean, that's a very important safety. It's almost like on the jet skis when you fall off on the water. The jet ski doesn't take off without you. Well, with this, child falls off the dirt bike, it kills the motor. I've seen people bypass these, and that's not really smart, because the bike just keeps on running. If the bike ends up running and it's on its side and it's not getting good lubrication, again, just because you laid a bike down, and you're going to crash the bike at some point, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to ruin the engine, especially if you shut that engine off, right at the time that you're falling off. You get back on, you kickstart it and go. There's the kickstart right there. That kickstart will go back in. Just boom, there it is. Back in again. You know, if you have questions, what we want you to do, and we mean this, put some questions in the comments. We'll tell you about it. You know, some things that if your kid happens to hit something and bend one of those forks, just replace the forks. The bike isn't totaled most of the time. It's just that the forks get bent or the rim gets damaged. These are pretty heavy duty things. One of the things you want to do also is every now and then reach down there and check those spokes. Make sure the spokes on the wheels don't come loose, and they're not loose, and that'll throw your wheel well out around. But also it'll cause the bottoms a lot of times of those spokes to poke little holes into your tires. And the last thing about tires is if you do get a flat tire, don't ride it, because you're going to end up eventually making it. You'll rip the valve stem right out of the tube, and it just makes it more difficult. You can sometimes add slime and save a tube, but most of the time you're going to end up either replacing the tube yourself or taking it to a shop where they can take the wheel off, and then when you put the wheel back on, you want to make sure everything's lined back up again, the chain's tight, and not over tight but not too loose, and you're able to ride the bike safely. So number one thing, again, I'm just going to recap real quick because I appreciate you hanging out with me. I tend to talk about these things, and I'm really passionate about it. It's exciting, but the first thing you want to do is make sure that your oil is clean. Second thing you want to do is make sure you add some sea foam or some fuel stabilizer to your fuel. When you're letting it sit for a long time, turn off the fuel. When you're transporting it, turn off the fuel so you don't get gas into your oil. Make sure your oil is not gritty, it's not dark, it's not nasty. Change that oil often. It's cheap. Change your spark plug often. It makes it run better. And if you break something, fix it.